Right now, as you're watching this, Florida lawmakers are 48 hours away from a floor vote that could eliminate your property taxes entirely by 2037. House Joint Resolution 203 just cleared its final committee, and here's what nobody else is telling you. If you own a $300,000 home, you'll hit tax-free status in roughly 3 years, not 10. The math is counterintuitive, the timeline is compressed for middle-class homeowners, and the vote happens this week. Here's the ground truth on Florida's 10-year glide slope to zero. Look, if you've been watching other Florida news channels and you keep hearing the same recycled talking points with zero actual analysis, I need you to do me a favor right now. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Because I'm not here to waste your time with fluff and speculation disguised as journalism. I'm here to give you the actual legislative text, the actual math, and the actual timeline that affects your wallet. Every single video on this channel is built on primary sources, real data, and the kind of analysis that helps you make informed decisions before everyone else catches up. So if that's what you want, subscribe now, because we're about to break down exactly how HJR 203 works, who wins first, and what you need to watch for in the next 30 days. Now let me tell you why you cannot afford to miss what I'm about to explain. This video gives you 3 critical pieces of information that no other Florida news source is connecting right now. First, the information threat. If HJR 203 passes in November 2026, your county and city have exactly 10 years to restructure their entire revenue model. That means potential impacts to libraries, parks, code enforcement, road maintenance, and anything not classified as public safety. You need to know which services are protected and which are on the table before you walk into that voting booth. Second, the opportunity. If you're a homeowner with a property valued between $250,000 and $450,000, you're in what I call the early winner bracket. Your non-school tax bill could effectively disappear between 2030 and 2032, 4 to 6 years before the full phase-out completes. That's real money you can redirect into mortgage principal, investment accounts, or major repairs. Other channels are treating this like it's a decade away. It's not. And third, the unique angle nobody else is explaining. The constitutional guardrail that protects police and fire funding, and the $300 million state backstop for rural counties. That's the political engineering that makes this bill passable, and it's also the reason why administrative bloat is about to become the hottest budget debate in every county commission meeting from now until 2037. And here's your mythbuster for today. You've probably heard people say that property tax elimination will defund the police. That's false. HJR 203 has a built-in constitutional floor. Law enforcement and first responder funding cannot drop below fiscal year 2024 to 2025 levels. The cuts come from somewhere else, and that's where the real fight begins. So let's get into the mechanics of this bill because the details matter more than the headlines. Representative Monique Miller, a Republican from Palm Bay and Brevard County, introduced HJR 203 in early January 2026. It's now the leading compromise bill in a session that started with at least 4 competing property tax elimination proposals. Miller's bill has cleared 3 committees: Select Committee on Property Tax Reform, State Affairs, and Ways and Means. Speaker Daniel Perez has publicly signaled he wants one consensus bill on the November ballot, not a fragmented menu of options that confuse voters. HJR 203 is currently that frontrunner. Now, why does this matter? Because the Florida legislature learned from past amendment cycles that when you put multiple tax proposals on the same ballot, voters split their support and nothing passes. By consolidating behind Miller's 10-year runway, leadership is betting that 60% of voters will accept gradual change over chaotic disruption. This isn't just about policy. This is about political strategy. They're designing a bill that can actually pass the 60% voter threshold, and that means building coalitions, protecting key constituencies, and engineering the timeline so that the people most likely to vote yes see relief first. But here's the part that changes everything. The 10-year timeline doesn't mean you wait 10 years to see savings. The math works completely differently depending on your home's value. And this is where most news coverage gets it wrong. HJR 203 doesn't give you one big exemption in 2037. It gives you an additional $100,000 exemption every single year, stacking on top of Florida's existing homestead exemption. Let me walk you through the timeline because this is critical. November 2026, voters approve or reject the amendment. If it passes, here's what happens. January 1st, 2028, the first $100,000 exemption takes effect. Then from 2029 through 2036, the exemption grows by $100,000 annually. And finally, January 1st, 2037, total elimination. 100% of your homestead property value is exempt from county, city, and special district taxes. School taxes are untouched. This only applies to non-school levies. Now here's the early winner math that nobody is explaining clearly. If your home is worth $350,000 and your existing exemptions already cover $50,000, by year 3, which is 2030, you'll have an additional $300,000 in exemptions. That's $350,000 total, which means your entire assessed value is covered. Your non-school property tax bill at that point? $0. You're done paying in year 3. Compare that to a $2 million home. They'll still be paying taxes on $700,000 in year 3. They don't hit zero until the full 10-year runway completes in 2037. Do you see the design here? This is brilliant political engineering. Middle-class homeowners, the largest voting bloc in Florida, see full relief first. By 2032, millions of Floridians will have zero tax bills and will become the most motivated constituency to protect the bill from any future legislative reversal. Luxury homeowners wait longer, but by the time they get relief, the political momentum is unstoppable. You can't reverse a constitutional amendment when 70% of homeowners are already tax-free and furious at the idea of going back. But there's a massive elephant in the room, and I need you to understand this because it's where the entire debate is going to focus. If local governments lose billions in revenue over 10 years, what happens to police, fire, and emergency services? This was the deal breaker. This was the question that killed earlier versions of property tax elimination bills. And HJR 203 has an answer. The bill contains a constitutional mandate that law enforcement, fire departments, and emergency medical services cannot have their funding reduced below fiscal year 2024 to 2025 baseline levels. This was the deal that brought moderate Republicans and swing district lawmakers on board. Sheriffs, fire chiefs, and police unions were the loudest opponents of earlier cold turkey elimination bills. They testified in committee hearings that overnight cuts would lead to slower response times, reduced patrol coverage, and public safety disasters. By constitutionally protecting their budgets, Miller neutralized the strongest opposition. But here's the flip side, and this is where your local government is about to get very creative or very lean. If police and fire are protected, where do the cuts come from? Everything else. Parks and recreation departments, libraries, road resurfacing projects, code enforcement, animal services, county administrative staff, all of it is now on the table. Counties and cities will be forced to choose, trim the fat or find new revenue streams. And here's what I expect to happen over the next 10 years. You're going to see a wave of new fees, tolls, and service charges. Vehicle registration fees, building permit costs, parking rates, beach access passes, anything that isn't technically a tax but can generate revenue is about to get more expensive. Some counties might try to implement local sales tax increases, which require voter approval. So expect ballot measures asking for half-cent or 1-cent sales tax hikes to fund roads or transit. Others will simply shrink services and dare residents to complain. You'll see library hours reduced, park maintenance will slow down, potholes will take longer to fix, and county commissioners will point to HJR 203 and say, "You voted for this. This is what tax elimination looks like." Now, Governor DeSantis has earmarked $300 million in state aid for smaller rural counties that can't easily pivot. That's a one-time cushion, not a permanent subsidy. It buys time, but it doesn't solve the structural problem. A rural county with 20,000 residents and a small tax base can't just invent new revenue streams. They don't have toll roads. They don't have premium beach parking. They don't have a large enough commercial sector to lean on sales taxes. So that $300 million is essentially a bridge loan to help them figure out how to shrink government services without collapsing entirely. So the bill protects cops and firefighters, but puts everything else at risk. The question is, will voters accept that trade-off in November? And that brings me to the 60% hurdle, because this is where the whole thing could fall apart. Even if HJR 203 passes both the House and Senate with supermajorities, it dies unless 60% of Florida voters approve it in the November 2026 general election. Florida constitutional amendments require a 60% supermajority, not a simple majority. That's a high bar. For context, Amendment 3, which was recreational marijuana, got 56% in 2024 and failed. Amendment 4, which was abortion rights, got 57% and also failed. Both of those had massive grassroots support, millions of dollars in advertising, and they still couldn't crack 60%. Early internal polling, which was leaked to Politico Florida in mid-January, shows HJR 203 at 63% support among likely voters. That's barely above the threshold, and here's the problem with polling on tax policy. Voters tend to say yes when you ask them, do you want lower taxes? But when they actually get into the voting booth and start thinking about the trade-offs, about the library closing, about the parks losing funding, about the fees going up, some of them flip to no. Polling tends to overestimate yes votes on tax policy because respondents don't fully understand the consequences until they're forced to make the decision. So here's the messaging war that's about to explode. If the Yes campaign can frame this as 10 years to fix the problem without chaos, they win. If opponents successfully frame it as 10 years of declining services and hidden fee increases, it's a coin flip. The messaging war will be brutal, and it starts the moment the bill passes the legislature. You'll see ads from both sides. You'll see firefighters and police chiefs saying, "We support this because our funding is protected." You'll see librarians and parks advocates saying, "This will destroy the quality of life in your community." And voters will have to decide which argument they believe. But there's one more layer to this that nobody's discussing, and it's the one I find most fascinating because it affects the entire real estate market. What happens to property values and buyer behavior when property taxes start disappearing? If HJR 203 passes, Florida homestead properties become the most tax-advantaged primary residence assets in the United States by 2035. Right now, states like Texas, New Hampshire, and Tennessee have no income tax, but still charge substantial property taxes. Texas property taxes are brutal. New Hampshire property taxes are among the highest in the country. Florida already has no income tax. If property taxes phase out on homesteads, the only major tax left is sales tax, and you control that by controlling your spending. For retirees, remote workers, and high earners, this is checkmate. You can live in Florida, pay zero income tax, pay zero property tax on your primary residence, and only get taxed when you buy stuff. That's unprecedented. Large real estate investors and build-to-rent firms are already modeling what happens when homestead properties carry effectively zero tax burden by the early 2030s. If you're a fund manager looking at a 10-year hold, buying Florida single-family homes now, before the exemptions fully kick in, becomes a no-brainer. You ride appreciation and you ride the tax phase out. Even if you're not getting homestead exemption yourself because you're an investor, you're betting that demand from homestead buyers will drive prices up as more people flood into Florida to lock in tax-free status. And that's exactly what I expect to happen. If this amendment passes in November, expect a surge in home buying activity starting in 2027. People will rush to establish homestead status before the exemptions begin in 2028. That means upward pressure on prices, especially in the $250,000 to $500,000 range, where the early winter math is most attractive. You're going to see buyers from California, New York, Illinois, all the high-tax states, accelerating their moves to Florida because the tax arbitrage becomes too good to ignore. Developers are quietly salivating over this. If demand spikes and property taxes phase out, Land values near job centers like Tampa, Orlando, and Jacksonville could see another 10 to 15% depreciation over the next 3 years on top of normal growth. But in rural counties where services get cut and fees rise, you might see stagnation or even declines. If you're in a county that can't replace the revenue and starts cutting services aggressively, people will notice. They'll see the parks deteriorating, they'll see the roads getting worse, and some of them will move to counties that manage the transition better. So you're going to see divergence. Some counties will thrive under this new model and some will struggle. So we've covered the bill, the budget guardrails, the voter threshold, and the market implications. Now the only question left is, what should you actually be watching for in the next 30 days? Here's your bottom line. HJR 203 is the most politically viable path to property tax elimination Florida has ever produced. It's not a fantasy. It's not a campaign promise that disappears after the election. It's a carefully engineered glide slope with constitutional protections for public safety and a decade-long runway for local governments to adapt. If you're a homeowner with a property valued between $250,000 and $450,000, you're in the sweet spot. You'll likely hit zero non-school property taxes within 4 to 6 years, not 10. But that relief comes with trade-offs. Expect cuts to parks, libraries, and administrative services. Expect new fees to fill the gap. Expect your local government to get leaner or get creative, and not always in ways you'll like. Now here's what to watch in the next 30 days. First, the floor vote timing. The House floor vote is expected in late January or early February 2026. If it passes, the Senate will move quickly. Watch for any last-minute amendments. Opponents might try to weaken the public safety guardrail or extend the timeline to 15 years. Any change to the core structure could kill the bill's momentum. Second, opposition formation. Police and fire unions are quiet right now because their funding is protected. The opposition will come from municipal leagues, county commissions, and public service unions representing librarians, park staff, and administrative workers. If they organize a Save Our Services campaign, polling could shift. Watch for coordinated media buys in March and April. Third, DeSantis' next move. If the bill passes, watch whether the governor actively campaigns for it in November. His endorsement would be huge, but he's termed out in 2026 and might save his political capital for federal ambitions. If he stays neutral, that's a yellow flag. It means he's not confident it'll pass, or he doesn't want to own the consequences if services start getting cut. Fourth, real estate pre-positioning. Track new home sales data in March and April. If builders start marketing tax-free by 2032 in their sales pitches, you'll know the industry believes this is passing. If they stay quiet, they're hedging their bets. So here's my ask. If you want to know the exact day the House votes on this, the final polling numbers before November, and whether DeSantis goes all in or stays silent, subscribe now. I'm not here to beg for clicks. I'm here to give you the information you need before everyone else figures it out. The next video drops the moment the floor vote happens. You're either in the intel circle or you're reading about it 3 days late on Twitter. Your call. I'll see you in the next one.